Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, all of those wonderful people out there looking to start their day with a crazy, crazy adventure.
Yes, we are two crazy health coaches bringing you the cutting edge and information on health and wellness and other cool stuff.
That's correct. So, what we've got today is a very interesting show, kind of inspired on the idea of the time change in spring and everything that's happening right now, moving things towards the idea of getting yourself motivated and activated right when, of course, it feels probably the hardest and most unique sort of. Concept that we have going on. So, like I say, this day is kind of an interesting day being out there because your body's just starting to finally want to kick in and adapt, and you're maybe waking up 40 minutes later or an hour later than you actually feel like you normally do because you don't have all those correct signals there still telling your system to be waking up. You're forcing the alarm clock. A lot of people I think end up struggling, and they got to realize time changes are actually kind of a struggle for most people who are more sensitive to environments and things of that nature, and it definitely changes with the way the body functions. So we see a lot of increase in heart attack condition. People actually getting more high level anxiety during this time of the season here because of this change, and that's just because it's so drastic. Moving an hour of your day around is just an interesting thing. So it's only been around about 100 years, so it's not something that we've been doing forever. The way that a lot of other cultures have dealt with this is they've actually had different styles of calendars, ran more on lunar cycles, 13 months out of the year, 28 days, kept things a little bit more normal. So we do 28 through 31 days, and everybody out there is always looking to change things up instead of keeping a very good circadian rhythm.
It seems to be a deeper story here about time changing and calendars and our synchronicity with the sun, the moon,
Correct.
planetary bodies. Is that a sign, another sign of how we've gotten out of sync with nature,
Out of
right?
sync.
Our calendar.
Very out of sync.
And this whole daylight savings thing is a attempt to balance out that imbalance that we have. We don't follow a 28-day, 13-month calendar.
Mm-hmm.
Now, why
Yeah.
is that? Where do you know the history behind that? How that all started?
So the biggest thing that occurred is that
And also, what other cultures did use a lunar calendar, something that seems more
correct.
accurate to our natural state of being.
Natural.
And should
Right.
people pay attention to that? Should we be
Much
aware
more
of the
natural.
moon and the sun and those
Definitely.
bodies?
Right, definitely. They spin us, they turn us. I mean, they're what actually make
They
us
pull us, they push
do
us.
us different things with our day cycle. So it's unique because when we see in the ancient world, I think every culture actually carried a 13-month and lunar based calendar system. And we really didn't see until we had the actual the Greco-Roman calendar start to develop. That we actually went to months based upon rulers' names and gods instead of the actual following of the sun and the moon. So we still have the Hebrew calendar, which is actually a lunar calendar because it follows the natural cycles that people still are using today. So if you are wanting to kind of step into understanding how that principle comes about, but it is interesting.
If somebody wanted to have a conspiracy theory about it, you could almost look at our current calendar as a way of forcing people to be out of sync with nature.
Correct, with nature, and just we all have that same philosophy, that same feeling in us that actually says, why do we have the 30 days has September, all the rest. I mean, why would we set it up that way when there's a very very quickening understanding that the moon sets a 28-day cycle. Very unique thing in the news is that Nassim Haramein just essentially found that the solar rotation of the internal structure of the sun is 27.68 days, and the actual movement around the Earth of the moon is 27.68 days. Wow. So they're in perfect sync.
Right.
We go out of sync.
Why wouldn't we be in sync with that?
Exactly.
That's so obvious.
So obvious.
So I'm advocating that we get back to a lunar calendar. Even if not on a whole,
crazy ideas.
We can just start following it. It's kind of like voting with your dollars. If we all just start going by the lunar moon, there's getting in sync with the moon, for women and their moon cycle, right?
Yeah, they have a lunar cycle.
And there's some cool hacks you can do. I've heard about sleeping in a blacked out room most of the time, but then when you're in that full moon cycle, actually opening the windows and letting your body receive the full moon light, and over time you will get in sync with the moon.
That's correct.
And I'm sure there's many other implications of I don't even know what, but hormones, circulation in the body, your ability to uptake and detox, because there would be an optimal, if we're going with the tide of the moon, so to speak, or the tide of our body, there's going to be an intake phase and an outtake phase, or a detox phase, right? So those are two examples of why being in sync with the moon, or the nature, the universe, can be valuable.
Oh, yes.
And I'm sure that goes even then into the center of the sun, the center of our solar system, the synchronizing of the moon, the planet, and the sun, and then the synchronizing with the center of our galaxy. There's going to be implications there. There's going to be some 27 point whatever ratio. There's going to be a fractal ratio that's going to go all the way from the center of our galaxy into the center of our cells.
Correct.
I would imagine.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's where it's all wonderfully interconnected.
So we had a falling out from that system. You were talking about Gregorian. No.
Yep, Gregorian calendar, and the mathematicians essentially sat down and tried to calculate what they believed was the right way of telling time. And in doing the mathematics and using
silly scientists,
using that instead of the actual just easy governing signs that are surrounding you to set that calendar in motion, that's where we do get a lot of very distinct issues. I think people who are, and the more sensitive you are, the effects are actually intensified, sometimes 100,000 fold. I know people who they are pretty much so far out of sync by the time they hit the end of the 28-day calendar that the last 3 days of the month that their whole body just doesn't function. They can't wake up. They've got no energy. Everything is set apart. And that just shows how the body should be doing something different at that point in time. And you can reprogram yourself. There's a very good, routine in the rewilding sort of movement out there. The idea of spending that 1 week of camping every 6 months at least in order to fully get yourself back in sync and on clock, because when the sun goes down, you should be thinking about bed. Ambient light, the way we live everything every day really kind of tells us that we're supposed to be awake when we're not. That means our hormones get depleted one direction or the other, and repeat that cycle enough times over, then you get that overall general discordance occurring. So it's unique because tonight I'm actually doing a talk at one of the local artisan food places here in Temecula, all about depression management, natural solutions, when to actually use pharmaceuticals, when to come in and try to to blend the two and use more integrative medicines, and just going through this. And we're going to talk a lot about body management, hormone management, time management. So many people just aren't giving themselves the proper setup phase. A lot of times, we love to be the people who hop out of bed and immediately run to a job. We're in the car, we're in traffic, when our bodies are still just now starting to process what's going to go, how am I going to treat the day? And here you've got, 5,000 cars surrounding you, and everybody's vying for the best opportunity to get to their local coffee shop in order to actually finally start being awake. So that's one of those where we really want to see that. But it always goes back to the fact for me that it's a recent invention. It started 100 years ago or so for us to actually save electricity when electricity generation was so low in the country. We didn't have enough places to generate electricity, that we had to cut lights at a certain time in order to actually allow for us not to have longer exposure.
And that's why we do this
during the winter, and that's why we do
so
what we
silly.
do. So it's all based on a power company light system. Benjamin Franklin wrote a paper, I think it was back in the late 1700s, about candle usage, and all the people in Europe, if they told everybody that to get out of bed an hour earlier, then they wouldn't be using candles as much. Like that's how, again, it was always talked about, but it wasn't instituted, and Arizona doesn't agree with it. So that's the funny thing. If you move to Arizona, you never do this.
I love Arizona. They're such rebels,
So way to go, Arizona, for saying, hey, listen, we don't need to, follow this.
We make our own rules. We're in Arizona.
Rules. Yes. So
we have cheaper gas.
But it is
We're really
interesting.
into crystals, and they have the big Jim Jam Festival, the biggest mineral show that I know of.
Yeah.
Wow, that's fascinating. So I like when you were talking about a week of camping every
6 months.
6 months or more,
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of rebooting your system.
Correct.
Kind of, it reminds me of grounding and grounding technologies. Grounding seems to me like it would be a great way to counteract the effects of daylight savings time, so spring forward.
Mm-hmm.
Preparing for that. We should be sleeping grounded regularly. I know there's debate about what's the best way to do that.
Yeah.
If you're, you can go online and look up grounding technologies. There's some that you plug into your grounding